This is the Friday, April 5th, 2019 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us again is Tomm Pfitzenmaier. Tom, welcome back.
Thanks, Delaney.
Tom, let's talk about the feeder markets because we didn't get to do that in the main show, and we teased that during the show. Put on $1.45 from last week, chugging right along. How much higher are we going to go?
Well, we had that expanded limit day up Thursday. Well, we got up around 155 on the May contract. Backed off from that on Friday. I would guess something pretty special is going to happen to take out that 155. I think that's going to be resistance. Going to be tough to take out. Corn prices are probably going to be stable. That's generally weakness in the corn price tends to be a positive for feeders. The fat market, like I said in the show, is probably topped out for the spring. So I would guess, that's not to say we couldn't hover in that 148 to 152 range for a while, but I think that 155 is going to be tough to take out.
When you look at beef prices as a whole, we've of course got all that stuff going on in Nebraska. Starting to hear some preliminary estimates for damages. We've got Tom here sent us a Facebook question asking, will beef prices go up considering the cattle lost in Nebraska? Well,
we've already talked about some pretty fancy numbers in terms of high losses over the last week or two. So I don't know that, unless the reality is really worse than what they've already talked about. And that certainly had to have been a component in some of the rally we saw in cattle over the last couple of weeks, because it was really talked about a lot. It was in the news. Anytime that happens, generally it gets factored in, and the reality isn't quite as bad as the news. Now, if that's not the case, maybe there is some more up, but I'd guess it's probably been pretty well factored in.
Okay. With all those things being said, we've got strong demand. We continue to see strong demand domestically and internationally. We've got a question here from Casey in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. Should I get an option to cover August cattle?
I would. I just think we got those prices up at fairly high levels. We've been buying puts on August and October cattle there's some upside potential, so we're not quite confident enough to just flat go out and sell the futures. But puts is what we've been using. Now, if you're a little bolder, maybe you can sell a call way out of the money and collect some premium to offset that, or tweak it a little bit that way. But that's the approach I would take on both the August and the October cattle.
When you look at demand, we see continued strength domestically, but export sales this week weren't really anything to write home about. Are we seeing a different story when we look at exports versus domestic demand?
Yeah, that was a disappointment. We were really hopeful that was going to be a better number than it was. On the other hand, we're right on the verge of grilling season, and that's always a good domestic demand situation. So I think that I don't know about exports, but I think domestic demand is going to be strong for beef going into the spring.
I know. I'm certainly ready to get the grill fired up.
That's for sure.
Tom, when we look at weather issues, let's talk about some that are affecting the grain side of things here. When is weather going to start becoming the major driving force behind the markets? We've got this question here from Farmer Finn in Minnesota on Twitter. So if it's too wet in 1 to 2 weeks, are we going to see that become a driving factor in the markets?
I think the very beginning of that's going to start Monday, and that planting.
This coming Monday.
This coming Monday is the first National Planting Progress Report. If that's low, which it probably is going to be, then I think as soon as that WASDE report's over Tuesday and we sort of get that factored in, the market attention is going to shift full blow into exactly what he's talking about. And I don't know that they're going to wait for it. They're going to start looking at forecasts. And if the forecasts are wet and don't show much hope, then the market's going to start to react to that. So, yeah, I think between now and, the end of April, that's going to be, there isn't really much else to talk about if you subtract out the China business.
If weather is going to be an issue then, or a factor into the markets, we talking a premium here, and if so, how much?
That's almost always what happens. They put in a weather premium. So that's going to be dampened a little bit if we come out with a carryout on Tuesday that's kind of high. And we've already got that high planted acreage number.
Are we talking corn here?
Correct. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. you know, that planting intentions number was what, 1.5 million higher than people would thought. Okay, so if you back that out and then you add in a little because demand hasn't been quite as good, that dampens the effect that this weather is going to have. Or, you know, everybody's like, well, the funds are going to massively cover their short position. Well, maybe not necessarily, unless it is more dire than everybody thinks. Well, I think everybody east of the Mississippi for sure is in okay shape. They're probably going to get started by the end of this week doing field work. So, yeah, I don't know. It could be a factor, but I don't see it's like through the roof kind of a factor.
Okay, and you mentioned the funds there. I wanted to ask you a question about that. We saw a net record short on funds. We're starting to see some short covering of the positions there. What's that indicating to you?
Well, nobody wants to be particularly heavily short going into the planting season. Now, maybe by the end of May, if everything's planted and looks good, that's a different story. But I'm not sure they're going to want to press the short side of that too hard going into that period. Now, it's possible they can cover those shorts and we just sit here and chop around and their shorts offset a little farmer selling and it doesn't have that much market impact. It doesn't necessarily have to shoot us up through the roof, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see them cover some of that.
Okay. Tom, we've got a lot of social media questions this week about the corn markets. Two more here for you about trade in particular. One of the events that happened this week was President Trump threatening to, of course, close our border with Mexico. We've got a question that came in from Glenn in St. Francisville, Illinois on Facebook. He said, if the president closes the southern border, what is the downside potential price for corn? Is there any positive news on the horizon that you're seeing?
I don't. Reducing trade can't be good. I mean, it's certainly a negative on corn prices. Whether that's 10 cents down or 20 cents down, or I'm not sure, but it certainly is a negative. I don't really think that's going to happen. But he's right. It would be negative if it did. Yeah, I mean, there's that, and then we've got the competition from South America and China. Those are sort of our demand issues that are sort of cross currents, I guess you'd call them, running through the corn market right now. Okay, final trade related question for you here. We've got Todd in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. He said, will corn go up on the day when tariffs are dropped, or is that figured in already? I assume he means if we get a trade deal and we see tariffs dropped there. Well, there's two theories on that. One is everybody's going to be euphoric and run in and buy corn. That's the positive side. The other side is this a buy the rumor, sell the fact? When you've talked about something for 6 months, you got to say to some extent it's already factored in. And then, like I alluded to in the show, if it's all new crop sales and not much of an old crop, then it all gets pushed off and muddled in with whatever's going on in the future, and it kind of minimizes it. So it's going to depend a little bit on. Certainly having trade is better than not having trade, and that's a positive. Whether it's factored in or not is going to be the question. Okay. Expectations are always a tricky thing to figure out. Hard thing to factor in, I'm sure. Right. When you look at, I think we mentioned just a little bit about ethanol in the main show, and I know you follow it pretty closely. I want to just end on that, Tom. Does ethanol look like a bright spot? I think you mentioned in your newsletter this week we saw the first production increase in 4 weeks. Is that indicating that maybe ethanol is turning back around? No. I think ethanol is in trouble. This RFS RIN thing has allowed oil companies to circumvent the usage of ethanol to some extent. The profitability, although it has improved over the last month, is still not that great. The blending margins are out to 64 cents, 65 cents, I think, by the end of this week, which should be a big positive, but that hasn't seemed to pull us up. So I don't know. I think they're overstating ethanol usage by as much as 150 million bushel. Wow. So I think if we don't start picking up the pace pretty darn quick here, there's going to have to be adjustment, and probably will be some minor adjustments in the WASDE report on Tuesday. So that industry is really bothersome. And I know everybody's kind of excited about E15, but that's sort of down the road, and I'm not sure it's going to have that much effect on the 18-19 marketing year, impact the ethanol usage in that marketing year. So I don't know, it's hard to be a little optimistic about that industry at this point.
Yeah, really banking on maybe a Chinese trade deal for the ethanol markets as well.
Well, yeah, that's sort of lurking out there too as a positive potentially.
Okay. Tomm Pfitzenmaier, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Laney.
As we noted at the end of our market-to-market segment, it is with great sadness that we acknowledge the passing of our longtime market-to-market analyst, Walt Hackney. Walt started on the show in 1983 and was a fixture of the program for more than 35 years. He was the analyst we relied on for a deep dive into the livestock market. His easy smile, vintage quips, and body of knowledge will be greatly missed. Our thoughts go out to Walt's wife of 58.5 years, his 2 children, 7 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, and the rest of the Hackney family.